What's going on, guys? It's Brandon back here again today, and today we have another redraft. I said in the last video, by the way, I had two BFRs go up yesterday. I'm not sure why one of them didn't upload originally, but the original one that was supposed to go up yesterday did, and I gave a little sneak peek in the video that today I wanted to get on a fun video done, and today we're going to be doing a redraft. The 2001 NHL draft. We've done 99, we've done 2000, and I said I want to do 2001 and 2002 by the end of the year. The reason why I want to get those two specifically is because there are no longer any players active from the 2001 or 2002 drafts. Now, in this draft, I will say, it was hard to put together. Mainly bad because there weren't many guys that were first-round caliber talents. At most, at this draft, I'd say there's a lot of guys that can go in like the second, third, fourth rounds, but I would say like first-round talents kind of end at number 8. Number 8 is where I'd say they end, and so we're gonna do it the same way we've always done. We're gonna write the name down. We got all the teams labeled where they're gonna go in order. Then we got their position. We're gonna who was originally drafted there, what was the original number of the person, and the original team that drafted them. So to start, number 1 in the original draft was Ilya Kovalchuk for the Atlanta Thrashers. He was drafted number 1 overall, and you know what? It stays that way. Ilya Kovalchuk will stay going number 1. He's a forward, of course, and probably the only guy I could see getting into the Hall of Fame in this redraft. This would be his first ballot year this year. I don't think he gets in first ballot because of the lack of time he spent in the NHL, but he was still a dynamic player when he did play here. And when, of course, he went over to Russia to play, it was after that long contract deal that he signed, and it was just, Now, number 2 going to Ottawa originally was Jason Spezza. And you know what? Jason Spezza stays going at number 2. The forward that went to Ottawa, spent most of his career there, ended up in Dallas, Toronto. Never got the Stanley Cup, like Kovalchuk at least went to the final. I mean, Spezza did, much younger in his career. He had a 90-point season in there. Good player. I don't think he'll make the Hall of Fame. I think he played over 1,000 games and had over 1,000 points, if I remember correctly. But I don't think he gets to the Hall of Fame purely because he wasn't a dominant player when he played. But overall, pretty good player. Now, number 3 is where we finally get off the rails. Originally drafted at number 3 to the Tampa Bay Lightning was Alexander Svitov. Never heard of that guy. And instead, we have a guy that's going to go, originally went 161st overall to Dallas. He's a goaltender, and one of my personal favorite goaltenders that's played the game. And he also played for Tampa at one point in his career. I have his hockey card with it. Mike Smith. Mike Smith, when he might have been the best goalie to play for crash teams most of his career. He was with Dallas when they really didn't need him because they had Turco and their backups were going around. So he ends up in Tampa. Tampa, he kind of shares duties a bit with Dwayne Rollison at one point, but he's never really the starter. And then he goes to Phoenix, and Phoenix is where he blossoms. He's fantastic. He's one of the only goalies to have scored a goal in the NHL. But at one point in the league, one of my favorite goaltenders, and his emotion is what drove him, and that's what I liked about him. He was a very emotional guy, and he would let you know when he didn't like something. Moving on, number 4, originally going 73rd to Chicago, and he was in one of the previous redrafts. I believe I had him going 5th overall when he was drafted to Calgary in 1999. Originally drafted here going to Florida was Stephen Weiss. Not a bad career. But Craig Anderson in his second round being drafted, the recently retired and from my hometown. Craig Anderson, the goaltender, will be going number 4. So 2 forwards, 2 goaltenders. I will say it's a very defenseman-heavy later on in the draft, but for a while we're not going to have many defensemen. Now Anaheim going 5th overall. Originally was Stanislav Chistov, and to say the least, Chistov was a bit of a bust. He did have a decent run in 03 with the Ducks when they went to the final. Never really panned out after that. But originally going 95th overall to the Philadelphia Flyers, and one of the players I grew up watching because he played for the Hawks for a long time. Patrick Sharp. Consistent 30-goal guy. up until basically 2 years before he retired. 3-time Stanley Cup champion, All-Star games consistently, 2014 gold at the Olympics. What is it there to say about Patrick Sharp other than he wasn't the most dominant force on his team? When you have Taves and Kane and Keith and Hossa, Sharp was kind of that Seabrook level. He was that number 2 to the number 1 kind of thing. And I have his jersey. I've shown the jersey off in videos. But Patrick Sharp in Anaheim, that's kind of blasphemous. But you know what? Up until this point, the 4 guys ahead have each played with the team that I have them drafted by. Kovalchuk and Spezza were drafted originally by Atlanta and Ottawa. So Mike Smith played in Tampa, and Craig Anderson played in Florida. Anaheim's the first one that Patrick Sharp does not play for. Number 6, we have the Minnesota Wild, and originally going there was Mikko Koivu. Of course, Koivu, pretty long-time Minnesota Wild until he played like 5 games with Columbus. But in this case, we have a guy that's going to move up from number 71. Just hit over well, he didn't just, but he was just over 1,000 games. And his nickname is Mr. Turtleneck. Thomas, let me just make sure I spell his name right, Plekanec. The Turtleneck man himself. Originally went 71st overall to Montreal. And just over 1,000 games, and pretty decent player all throughout his career. Very consistent. That's what Plekanec was. Besides his amazing turtleneck, very consistent with the Canadiens. Never was a dominant player. Never was a lead player. Like a specific guy that didn't go ahead, but he was a role player. He knew his role. He can play everywhere in the lineup. That sort of thing. And he had a lot of points as well. Now going number 7th overall, it originally was Mike Komisarek to Montreal. And going number 55 overall to Buffalo in this year's draft. Well, now going 7th overall, Jason Pominville. Pominville, when he started in Buffalo, was dynamic. And for a bit of his career, he would be dynamic. Went to Minnesota eventually after his prime was done, played well there. And after that, he was just kind of done. I mean, never again, like, he was dominant when he was a very young kid, first, second, third year. And then it kind of just slowly tailed off as he got older and older. But Pominville, pretty decent player. And we're going to round out with what I'd consider the actual first-round picks here. Going to Columbus, he did play for Columbus. Originally going here was Pascal Leclerc, who went at number 6 to Minnesota. No, this guy originally went number 6 to Minnesota. And I said he'd show up later. Played 5 games with Columbus in his career, and that was Mikko Koivu. Captain of the Wild for a long time, but he never was like that 100-point guy. That was Gaborik. Gaborik was the guy that could score when Minnesota first started. But Koivu, Brunette, and Gaborik were kind of that lead starting in Minnesota. Those 3 guys kind of would build the foundation. Of course, lead them on the 2003 conference finals run. Never really got farther than that. Koivu have had the pleasure of getting beaten by the Blackhawks a lot, which I'm sure he loved. Never made it really that far, but yeah, Koivu, decent career all around. And that pretty much ends the guys I'd consider first overall. Now, number 9 to Chicago. Originally went to Marutu, number 99th originally went to Marutu, and then going number 99 overall to Ottawa. He also played with Chicago. This guy, unfortunately, passed away in a horrific accident, and that was Ray Emery. Ray Emery spent about a year or 2 in Chicago, and that 2013 season, he was unbelievable. I remember he only had 1 loss in regulation. He was insane. He was the backup. Crawford took most of the starts. Emery was at that point pretty old at that point. I mean, look here, he's 2001 draft, he would have been 12, so he was already in his mid-30s. Meanwhile, Crawford was still in his late 20s, so I think that's why he got the starts. But Emery was Stanley Cup champion with Chicago, was the goaltender when Ottawa went to the final in 2007, and Chicago got him earlier on. I mean, he could have been backed up. He could have backed up Tebow, but they ended up getting Craig Anderson in this draft, so it's not too bad of a loss for them. Number 10, originally drafted was Dan Blackburn. That's a man who exists. I would have taken at number 49th overall to the LA Kings. He originally went. Another one of my just guys that I really liked growing up, and he had dynamic parts, but like he scored points, but I thought he scored more than he actually did, and that was Mike Camilleri. How do you spell that? Camilleri was a bit of a journeyman in his own right. I remember I just carded with LA, I just carded with Calgary, I just carded with Montreal, I had his card everywhere. Excuse me. And I don't think he ever played with the Rangers in his career. Did bounce around a bit. But overall, he's a very fast guy. I remember he was pretty good in that 2010 playoffs with Montreal. But yeah, so I can only do so much about guys who were kind of done by the time I got around. Number 11. It's a Phoenix. Originally went Frederick Sostrom. I assume that's how you pronounce that. Sjostrom. Not here. Number 13 overall, originally drafted to Edmonton, was Ales Hemsky. A very decent player on a team that was very bad for the most part of it. He was on that 2006 team that went to the Stanley Cup Final and lost, and he was pretty good in that run. Hemsky, I'd say, was the best player on those early 2010s Oilers, aside from probably Taylor Hall and Nugent Hopkins. I mean, Nugent Hopkins wasn't even that dynamic early on. He only had his first 100-point season. But Hemsky and Horkoff, those two guys were kind of the ends of hell by being in Edmonton during those 3 years where a lot more than 3 years that they just sucked over and over again. Eventually he had some freedom with Dallas before he'd be eliminated in the first round a bit. And I can't remember if he went anywhere after that, but Hemsky, not too bad of a player, kind of had to carry that franchise for a bit. Number 12 is Nashville. And originally going there was Dan Hamhuis. But here, number 32nd overall to Buffalo, I chose Derek Roy. Derek Roy, similar to Pominville, they both worked in the same system together. They originally were in the same system. It was Pominville and a second Buffalo guy in the first 12. Something I'll keep track of. But, why am I putting my knee up there? Roy, another guy that played a bit. I feel like he played a bit of everywhere, but I remember only him with Buffalo. Scored goals. That was his thing. He scored goals, and he also was not too bad defensively. I remember being pretty speedy. A lot of these guys, a lot of this draft is speed. That was their game. The draft of speed, and that kind of would foreshadow what was to come with the salary cap era and the speed becoming part of the game instead of size. But Roy made his work count. Another big part of those early salary cap teams, mid 2000s teams, and where Buffalo was doing pretty well. And then finally, back to a goaltender for number 13, but originally drafted here was Ales Hemsky to Edmonton. Here, this guy went 63rd overall to Colorado, and I honestly thought he was drafted earlier than this. I was surprised when I saw him on the list. Peter Budaj, aside from his amazing name, Budaj, I thought, played a lot more than he also did as well. Only about 300 and something games in the NHL, which for a goaltender is not too bad. But still, I thought he played more than that. Was the back end of a lot of those Colorado teams that were end of the Sakic era. I remember because you had Fedor come in for a bit, and then you had Budaj was also there, but then you also got Anderson, and then Budaj again, and then you had Varlamov, and then it was all over the place with the goaltending in Colorado at that time. And then he ends up in Montreal as the backup, and then I believe he got some starts in some of the playoff runs. But Budaj, not a bad goaltender by any means, pretty good record, and played on some teams, but I feel like was a majority of the time a backup, even though he has the starter numbers, which is kind of strange. Now, Calgary at number 14, originally chose Chuck Kobasu, I don't know, but going 106th overall to, 106th overall to San Jose that year, was the first defenseman of this draft. Christian Ehrhoff, Blackhawks legend Christian Ehrhoff. Ehrhoff, one of my favorite defensemen in the league. It was really situational with him. In Vancouver, things worked. In San Jose, things worked. In Buffalo, they kind of worked. I mean, he was probably their number one defenseman at the time, which is kind of saying a lot about Buffalo's defense. This is like 2014, 2015 time, so that's kind of what I mean by that. And Christian Ehrhoff Love the guy. He's not a number 1 defenseman. I'm not sure if he's a number 2 or 3 defenseman. I put him top 4, say the top 4, but not probably better than bottom 2. If he's on your bottom 2, then you have a pretty good team. But Ehrhoff, not too bad of a career. Could run a power play, could kill penalties, could do whatever you needed him to do. Now Carolina at number 15 originally chose Igor Knyazhov, Knyazef, I don't know. But originally going 172nd to Philadelphia that year. We have a German. Not only is he German, I didn't even know he played for Philadelphia. I don't think he actually did play for Philadelphia. I believe that pick was moved. I remember him in Boston. I remember him on Long Island. I remember him because he was in the 2013 final against the Blackhawks. Dennis Seidenberg. From what I remember, wasn't his career ended, or was that Johnny Boychuk, that his career was ended with a high stick in the eye or something like that? I don't remember if it was him or Boychuk, but Seidenberg, he had a shot. He had a very powerful shot, I remember, from the point. And he was prominent in that 2013 run for the Bruins. I believe he won the Cup in 2011 with the Bruins as well. But overall, Seidenberg makes it into the top 15, halfway point, and he would be going to Carolina. 16. Originally drafted here was R.J. Umberger, who was a Vancouver draft pick. I did not know he was a Vancouver draft pick. Wait a minute. I knew that. I definitely knew that. He obviously would be moved to Philadelphia and then Columbus. But 192nd overall to Dallas that year was the guy who was considered to be the master of the shootout, especially at the time. And what is there to say about Jussi Jokinen? I remember some people calling him useless. I remember some people calling him dynamic, just never got really the chance to let it go. I feel like he was injured a bit when I remember him. I remember him jumping around a bit. He was prominent in Carolina. Of Dallas, when he started, he was a shootout king. Then he was in Carolina for a bit. I believe he was in Pittsburgh. I feel like was he with the Rangers at some point as well? But Jussi Jokinen, obviously not as dynamic or well known as his brother, I don't know if his probably not even related, but possibly related relative Olli Jokinen, who was the journeyman. But Jokinen, just remember for being master of the shootout, and pretty cool first name, Jussi. I like that name. Toronto, number 17. Originally going here was Carlo Koliakovo, who is now known, I believe, for being on Sportsnet, if I'm correct. TSN, one of those two. I can't watch Canadian broadcast networks because I'm in the U.S. But Koliakovo is not going in this draft, I don't believe. I don't think I have him going. So, originally going number 12 to Nashville. Drops only a little bit. Dan Hamhuis, which I'm sure Toronto would not have mind to have. Hamhuis was a very good defenseman. He had a little bit of offense in there, but most known for his defense. Was with Nashville, was with Vancouver, and kind of disappeared after that. I don't really remember him playing for that much longer after his time in Vancouver was up. Other that's our third defenseman. Ehrhoff, Seidenberg, Hamhuis. And we're at number 17. We have the same amount of goalies as defensemen. Actually, we've had one more goalie than defenseman. But moving on from Toronto, we have LA. LA drafted Jens Karlsson at number 18. If you have no clue who that is, believe me, neither do I. So Karlsson, originally going number 16 to Vancouver was R.J. Umberger. He drops 2 spots to LA. Umberger, I remember because he played in Columbus when the Hawks were in the same division as them, and Columbus was very bad, but he was in one of the bright spots. He and Rick Nash were like the 2 bright spots that I remember on Columbus at that time. And not really much to say that I originally didn't about Umberger. Played in Vancouver, played in, not LA. Vancouver, Philadelphia, Columbus, I don't remember anywhere else. Number 19, we have originally Boston drafted Shaone, S-H-A-O-N-E, Shane, I don't know, Morrison, with 2 N's at the end. Originally going number 4th overall to Florida was this gentleman, and now that I think about it, I should have put him higher, But Boston would be getting Stephen Weiss, who was with Florida when they were pretty bad. Florida was pretty bad when they had him, but he was a bright spot in their lineup. Of course, he'd move on to Vancouver, and I feel like I heard mixed opinions about him when he was in Vancouver. It's almost a decade ago now. But I actually don't remember when Weiss retired. That's the funny thing. I remember he was kind of a leader of the Panthers at that time. It was Weiss, and they had David Booth in there. Somehow both ended up in Vancouver. But, yeah, interesting that is for Weiss. San Jose, again, at number 20. I say again, he haven't even gone yet. Originally drafted was Marcel Goc, G-O-C. Originally going number 151 to Vancouver. And a funny story about this gentleman. Love to hate him as a Hawks fan. Kevin Bieksa had his fair share of moments in the NHL. Of course, now known for being on the Sportsnet panel. I do know that. Bieksa was a tough guy. The way he got into the NHL, it was reported to legend, is that Sergei Fedorov's brother, Fedor Fedorov, whom Brian Burke was not a fan of when he was the GM in Vancouver, apparently Bieksa knocked him out, and Burke said get him an NHL contract, and lo and behold, there he was. He had a booming shot. He scored many booming shots, but he was most known for his fighting, his defense, and agitating the other teams. Very big agitator, and can only give him credit that he was able to get other teams' skin. Number 21. This guy was kind of placed here based on stats because I don't remember much of him. Pittsburgh originally drafted Colby Armstrong here, but going number 176 to the New York Rangers was Marek Sidlicki. His numbers kind of made me put him up this high up. I really don't remember Sidlicki too much. I feel like I remember him playing in New Jersey. Wait, was he drafted in New Jersey? No, he was drafted to the Rangers. But Sidlicki, I feel like I remember him on the Rangers more than anything. But Marek was I can't really say much about him. I don't remember much about him. So we're gonna move on to number 22, which Buffalo drafted Yuri Novotny, Novotny. Well, drafted right before Sidlicki at 175 overall to San Jose that year was Ryan Clough. Jeez, I wrote that horribly. Ryan Clough. Clough was a fighter. He was played on that bottom six role when San Jose was pretty good. I feel like he only played with San Jose and then never played again. I don't remember too much of him, but wasn't a points guy. He did score a few, but he was. I remember one time when he kind of lost his mind and smashed everything down the locker room hallway in a game against Vancouver, I think it was. But Clough was a fighter, and he would clear the way for guys like Thornton, Marlowe, Pavelski, Setaguchi, in those early 2010 Shark teams that led them to be so successful, which leads me to why he was put up this high. Now, the remaining 6-7 guys I feel I either know very little about or just their stats kind of propelled them up to this area. So, number 23, we have going to Ottawa. I'm surprised Ottawa at this point had draft picks. I guess they were just they were kind of like just starting to get good, so that's kind of why. Originally drafted here was Tim Gleason, who went 221st to Washington. Tim Gleason did not go 221st to Washington. This gentleman did go 221st to Washington. He won two Stanley Cups with the Blackhawks. Ottawa would get this guy. I believe he also had 2 stints with the Blackhawks. Johnny Oduya. Oduya was one of the 4 defensemen the Hawks relied on in that 2015 Cup run. Not known too much for his offense, more of a bottom 3, bottom 2 kind of guy, but he did play top 4 minutes. I believe he was paired with Jarmelson for most of that 2015 Cup run. So he was kind of that 4th guy on the top 4, but he played his role, and he played his role well. Those 2 Stanley Cups I remember sticking out. I'm trying to remember. I remember he played in Dallas, played in New Jersey, played in Winnipeg. I really like he came from the Atlanta-Winnipeg franchise. I don't remember which one, but I remember I remember him being part of that 2012 playoffs was when he first started with the Hawks, and then he moved on to Dallas for one season, and then came back in 2017. I don't know. And another Blackhawk being drafted here, not very short amount of time. Excuse me, I'm starting to get tired from talking. Florida drafted Lucas Krejci originally at 264th. Oh no, just he drafted Lucas Krejci here, then 264th overall to the Anaheim Ducks. It's a guy that actually played a while in the NHL. P.A. Parito, who somehow, some way, had pretty good numbers. It seemed like he was always scoring goals whenever I saw him on TV, but he wasn't seen as like a top 6 forward. That's the crazy thing. For a bottom sixer, pretty good depth guy. Journeyman. He played a lot of places around the league. Rangers, Islanders, Blackhawks, Canadians, Rangers. Where was he drafted by? Ducks. Maybe he played with the Ducks. But played with a lot of teams. I believe I have his hockey card somewhere. I have a lot of these guys' hockey cards somewhere, to be fair. And definitely an upgrade over Krejci, who wasn't a bad defenseman, but definitely wasn't top 4, more of a bottom 2, 7th defenseman kind of guy. Montreal originally drafted Alexander, Perzogin, I don't know, at number 25. In this case, going 193 to Ottawa, and I'm surprised this guy, once again, was not drafted earlier on. Not earlier, I mean earlier as in time-wise, like in the 90s, because I feel like he was a lot older when I was watching him. Brooks Lake, Washington, everyone remembers him for. Kind of on that second line in Washington, and I don't remember him. I feel like he ended up in Montreal anyway, if I remember correctly. I feel like he had the guy that had a boon of a contract, and so Montreal took him on, and he played out the rest of his career there. No, that was Carl Alsner. Jesus. Some guys are just mixing with my head today. But Brooks Lake, second line guy, maybe probably thinking he's at the third line by the end of his time in Washington. Again, don't remember really what happened to him. Just kind of disappeared. A lot of these guys kind of disappeared. It's funny because I feel like I remember watching some of these guys, and then there's other guys I have no recollection of. Yeah, I'm putting on this draft list. But yet their stats or their numbers or just remembrance of them is kind of what's influenced them. Dallas, again, at number 26. I don't think that they drafted that high. Jason Bacashinua, Bacashihua. Originally drafted number 9 in Chicago. Here I put Tumo Ruutu. Tumo Ruutu, of course, I told the story about when he was arrested on the channel in my one of my neighborhoods that I lived in. And besides that funny story, Ruutu was good when he was with the Hawks. He was one of the better players when he was with the Hawks, but he was injured a lot. He originally was traded essentially 1-for-1 for Andrew Ladd. I'm sorry the Hawks win that trade. Ladd becomes a great force on the bottom. He played up and down the lineup. He could play the first, he could play the third. Never really went down to the fourth line. And of course, he would become the captain in Winnipeg, and that kind of Ruutu did not play too much longer in the NHL. Of course, I did the career video on Ruutu, but he wasn't a dynamic player like Ladd was. I mean, Ladd wasn't dynamic, but he was a very good player, known around the league, and he just retired after he was drafted in 2004, so he played essentially 20 years in the NHL. Ruutu played maybe 10. So that's a trade the Hawks will look back on and nice. Philadelphia, number 27, drafted Jeff Wojciechowski. Did not play that many games in the NHL, but I remember this name, and I don't remember why I remember this name. Maybe from the NHL Slapshot game. I was thinking that because I remember hearing the announcer Bill Clement saying Wojciechowski. But taken number 40 by the Rangers that year was a guy I have no recollection of. I remember maybe the name, but I have no recollection of this guy. But his numbers, I couldn't put him any lower. Fedor Tutin. The name sounds familiar. I think if he played in Columbus, maybe I definitely know have his hockey card because that kind of sounds familiar. But I can't say much about him. He's a defenseman, and he is the 7th defenseman taken in this redraft, and we're at 27. So, not many great defensemen here. We're already at Fedor Tutin and Johnny Oduya. Reason Johnny Oduya is high, he would be a second rounder in this draft if he didn't win the Cups. But, yeah. Moving on, number 28, New Jersey originally drafted Adrian Foster, and then number 21 to Pittsburgh originally drafted was Colby Armstrong. And this was a anomaly for me. Let me explain once I write this name down. Colby Armstrong going to New Jersey. So, Armstrong, I look at his numbers. His numbers are not bad. He's a bigger guy, power forward. Of course, now he's on, which one of the networks is he on? I know he's on one of them. But I look at his numbers, and I remember watching him play a bit when he was in Pittsburgh when I was really young. I remember the Winter Classic against Buffalo before he was traded to Atlanta for Hossa. That's honestly probably where it went wrong for him. I don't remember him being bad and not playing that. I feel like he should have played longer. Just judging by his numbers, maybe because it was the Atlanta effect, maybe he was just sick of it. I don't remember any circumstances around it. They could have had series. These guys could have had series-ending injury, or not series, but in career-ending injuries. But I honestly don't remember that. So yeah. So Armstrong, if you're Colby Armstrong, if you're watching this, if you want to comment down below exactly what happened here, I honestly don't remember. Chicago at number 29, they'll draft a defenseman. This is their second pick of this draft. They originally would have drafted Ray Emery. They originally drafted Tumo Ruutu. Originally here they drafted Adam Monroe. Yeah, Chicago drafting in the early 2000s was pathetic. 23rd overall to Ottawa went Tim Gleason. Tim Gleason, another guy with a booming shot, would run the Carolina power play near the end of the 2000s decade. And nothing much to say about him. I don't remember him playing anywhere else outside of Carolina. I don't. Yeah, that's about it. LA for the last pick, last but not least. Originally drafting Dave Steckel, who I remember. I remember him scoring the Game 6 winner against Pittsburgh when he was with Washington in 2009, second round. Pittsburgh got a 3-2 series lead, and then they won Game 7. But Steckel got that overtime winner there. And originally drafted 7th overall to Montreal. I had to put this guy because why did I have to? Komisarek. Mike Komisarek. I always get confused between this guy and Roman Hamrlik, because their names kind of sound similar, even though they're drafted 10 years apart and not even first overall pick. Mike Komisarek is not. I don't remember if this is the guy I have a personal connection to, because it's one of them too. And I remember because my grandparents met their father at a casino. That's the thing. I don't remember if it was Hamrlik or Komisarek. I always get the two confused. Looking back, I think it's Komisarek, but I really don't remember because I'm pretty sure it's Komisarek. But he was drafted 7th overall to Montreal, the hard-hitting defenseman going to LA in this redraft. And what he was remembered for is the contract that Toronto signed, and his body gave out. His body was done, and that makes me remember, yes, it was Komisarek that my grandparents were talking about. But very hard-hitting defenseman. Not many points as a defenseman, but that was not his role. His role was to hit or be hit. And unfortunately, hitting what ended his career short. Honorable mentions. We have 2 goaltenders, a forward, and another forward. Goaltender, Cristobal Huet, going 214th to LA. Reason he's not higher is because he did not play that long in the NHL, and his contract with the Hawks kind of screwed him up. And he goes to, did win the cup in 2010 with the Hawks. Martin Gerber, another goaltender, pretty much was backup, drafted 232nd to Anaheim. Was the backup to that 03 team behind Jaguar, and then he would win the Stanley Cup with Carolina. He'd start as the starter, and then Cam Ward took over and won the Conn Smythe. Jay McClement, forward, a guy who I have no clue who he is, drafted 57th overall to St. Louis. And Kyle Wellwood, someone who I have so many hockey cards for whatever reason, yet hardly remember him. Forward, 134th overall to Toronto. I remember him playing in Vancouver as well, but that's about it. So yeah, this video is actually going over 35 minutes almost. So yeah, tell me down below who you would have chosen where. I said I'd want to get a redraft done, so this is it. You're welcome. Now I just have to get the 2002 one done by the end of the year to fulfill my promise, and then that'll kind of be it unless we want to go backwards for a couple of them. It's about time I get a video out that's not a BFR. Let's get rid of this sheet in a minute. But yeah, I want to thank you guys so much for watching this redraft video. I'm hoping to get some other content out, but once again with college I'm very busy. I finally had some time here to get this one out, so yeah, Thank you guys so much for watching once again. Comment down below what you would have changed if you disagree or agree with any of my picks, or if you have any personal stories with these picks. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I shall see you guys in the next one. Goodbye.